So, there's this book called Dune that's really long, and there's this moderately long movie based on that, also called Dune, that's coming out soon. And it's a big deal. So if you haven't read the book yet, it's way too late to do that now before it comes out. So consider this video me doing you a solid, because I know you're not going to read the book anyway. And this is going to be sort of a primer of all the things that you need to know going into Dune. And then in the second half of this video, we're going to kind of break down what exactly we just saw, what does it all mean, and see where we go from there. Here's everything you need to know about Dune before and after watching it. You're welcome. Hi, my name is Kyrie, and welcome to Flights of Fantasy, the show where we look at different science fiction and fantasy movies and ask, what do they mean? So Dune is finally here, and you know what that means? Let's go, Denis Villeneuve.
Sci-fi. Sci-fi.
This movie isn't the first adaptation of Dune, but I will dare say that it is the best we've gotten so far. It's kind of hard to balance all the details and all the backstory with what people need to know in order for it to make sense and also for it to be short enough to be in a movie. So let's break down a couple of details in this universe that you might want to know before you go and watch it. The universe's Dune, when we come into it, is after the Butlerian Jihad, or the Great Revolt, where basically after 2 generations worth of violence and conflict and death, a new concept was raised. Man must not be replaced. Replaced by what, you might say? Thinking machines. Computers. Normal machines? Yeah, that's fine. But basically, if it thinks, it was exterminated. I mention this because the technology of Dune can be kind of confusing at times. We have no AI that you would think of, but they made up for this in the form of human computers, or mentats. They can store incredible amounts of information and data, and they are often well known for being advisors, tacticians, strategists. So now that we understand the technology a little bit, let's break down the power structure of this universe. We have the Padishah Emperor, we have the Spacing Guild, and we have the Federated Great Houses of the Landsraad. What the heck do those mean? The Padishah Emperor is basically the emperor of the universe. His power is checked by 2 other groups, including the Spacing Guild. The Spacing Guild is extremely important because they are the only ones capable of interstellar travel. They have a monopoly on the thing. So if you want to go anywhere, you got to go through them. And something that they need also in order to make interstellar travel possible is spice, but we'll get to that later. His power is also checked by the Great Federated Houses of the Landsraad. Basically all the most powerful houses in the universe. Certain houses are held in higher esteem, such as the Atreides house, and others not so much, like the Harkonnens. And up here in parentheses, we have the Bene Gesserits. And we'll get to those. But you can basically, in your mind, think of them as witchy eugenic ladies. That'll make sense later. So that's the power structure. So without any major spoilers, I thought it might be nice for you to be able to see the faces to go with the character names, because sometimes it's a blink and you miss it kind of deal. So first off, we have the Atreides house. The Atreides house is one of the great federated houses of the Landsraad, and the head of the family, Duke Leto, is a very popular person. One might say he's a very powerful person. Also in this faction we have Lady Jessica, who is Duke Leto's concubine, and Paul, who is their son. He also has a couple of advisors. We have Dr. Yue, who is the personal physician to Duke Leto and his family. Gurney Halleck, who is the War Master for the Atreides household. It's said that his fighting skills are second to none, and that most people don't last more than a few seconds in a fight with him. Another one of the advisors is Thufir Hawat. He is the mentat for the Atreides family. He was also in charge of protecting the Atreides household, whether that was from spies or outright assault. He was also in charge of teaching Paul the art of warfare, as well as the political and military strategy that he would need to eventually take up his father's position. And finally, we have Duncan Idaho, a sword master of Genaz, which basically means he's really, really freaking good with a sword. And he, like the others, was in charge of teaching Paul. So, the Emperor. He is the emperor of the universe. He has a daughter, but she's not important in this movie. He is in charge of something called the Sardaukar. The Sardaukar are an elite combat force that are renowned and feared for their combat abilities. They are ruthless, they are brutal, largely in part because they were trained on a prison planet. There's one last detail that might be useful for you to know. It's something called imperial conditioning, and it's something that's given to all the doctors who graduate from doctor school, we'll say. Imperial conditioning basically means that you are not allowed to do harm, and it is the ultimate conditioning, one that cannot be removed or changed on someone without killing them. So, doctors can do no harm in this universe. So now we have the Harkonnens. They are also a great house of the Landsraad, except nobody really likes them. So people that you should probably know. There's Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. This guy sucks. Nasty man. There's Feyd-Rautha, who is the Baron's nephew and heir apparent. He is exceptionally deadly. Also a nasty boy. And finally, there's Piter, who is Baron's mentat. He's a creepy man. We don't like him. And finally, there's the Bene Gesserits. We'll get to them after you watch the movie, because they're kind of confusing. And it's better to just go in knowing nothing about them. I don't want to confuse you. So a couple of quick notes, and then you can go watch it, and then come on back, and we'll talk about it. First, shields are a thing. You're going to see the blue shields when people have them activated, and red when they are hit. So if you see that going on the screen, that's what's going on. That's somebody's shield. The second thing that I want you to know that is very important, so that way you have the right expectations going into this movie, is that this movie is not the full story. It is about 1/2 to 2/3 of the book. The pacing for this movie might seem a little strange. At some points, it'll feel almost anticlimactic because you're waiting for something bigger to happen. But this is all the buildup for the next movie, which, if that's not made, we're all gonna have a really bad time. So if it feels like the ending is either rushed or it doesn't really make sense, that's why. Now that I have prepped and primed you, I want you to go off, watch the movie, then come back. I'll wait here very patiently. This is your warning for spoilers. Anything past here, spoiler territory. Book 2. What the heck did I just watch? I don't expect that many of you are going to be asking this because I think they do a pretty good job at laying everything down, but I also read the book, so I'll try to explain things that I thought could be confusing if you haven't read the book. Once again, your final warning, spoilers. And given that I don't know which of these topics are going to be covered in the next movie, I'm going to try to limit this to things that were shown on screen in this movie. So to make sure we're on the same page, let's do a plot summary. Fresh your memory if maybe you saw it yesterday or last week or whatever. Duke Leto Atreides of the House Atreides is assigned by the Padishah Emperor to go to Arrakis and become the new fief ruler. He's going to be making sure that the production of spice continues flowing and do a better job at managing the planet than the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens were extremely oppressive against the Fremen, who are the native people of Arrakis. And so Duke Leto is trying to go in and he's trying to forge an alliance with them, so that way things are running smoother. So spice, it does interesting things to your mind, required for space travel, turns your eyes blue if you use it for long enough, and could possibly extend your lifespan or have other physical effects. And the Harkonnens, who were previously the owners of the planet, basically the wardens of the planet, they are not going to be so easily kicked out. And they actually kind of really hate the Atreides house, so they want to just wipe them out, kill them all. And they've got a couple of tricks up their sleeve to do it, including breaking the imperial conditioning of Dr. Yue in order to get him to betray and lead to the death of the house. He's basically a double agent. So they have that up their sleeve, and they are also being gifted with a few legions of the Sardaukar. Duke Leto knows going into this that this assignment is some sort of trap, but he is politically forced to accept it. There's not really much that he can do about it. So Duke Leto heads to Arrakis with his son Paul and his concubine Lady Jessica. I want to clarify because they kind of mess this up a couple of times.
Duke Leto Atreides means nothing to our order, but his wife is under...
He is not married to Lady Jessica. Lady Jessica is not Duke Leto's wife. She is the love of his life, yes. She is his concubine. Because politically it makes sense for Leto to be able to marry into other families, to raise his status or to get more power. That's why they're not married. So Jessica, love of his life, not his wife. So let's talk about Paul. Paul from a very young age has been trained in all sorts of fighting styles, as well as the ways of the Bene Gesserits, which were definitely not allowed because he's a guy. Paul has also been having these prophetic dreams, which are of great interest to both Lady Jessica and the Reverend Mother, who ends up coming by and gives him the test to see if he is an animal or a human. The test involves him staying in control of his body and suffering through enormous amounts of pain. He passes, which is great. This is basically an important step of the Bene Gesserits, recognizing that he could be potentially their chosen one. But they also recognize that it's extremely possible and likely that he's not, because they have different other leads going on. In fact, Jessica was supposed to have a girl, so that way that one could be mated with somebody else and create the Kwisatz Haderach from that. So, Reverend Mother, still not happy with Jessica, and basically tells Jessica that Duke Leto is definitely going to die, but maybe you and Paul won't. I don't know. I hope you guys won't die, but it's looking pretty bad. You should have had that girl that we wanted you to have. Once they get to Arrakis, Leto learns firsthand the dangers of the sandworms of the planet. The sandworms are the spice protectors, you could say. You can't have your shield on in the desert, you can't walk normally in the desert, and you certainly can't harvest if there are any worm sign, because these worms can feel vibrations in the sand, and they are terrifying and huge and extremely deadly. It's not very often that you see one and live to tell the tale. So Leto sends out Duncan Idaho to meet with the Fremen and to make nice with the Fremen, try to get them as political allies. Unfortunately, however, the Harkonnens attack. Because of Dr. Yue, they are able to take down the shield of the stronghold that the Atreides family is in, and with the combined forces of the Emperor Sardaukar, the household is almost entirely wiped out. But Dr. Yue knows that the Harkonnens are not going to hold up their end of the bargain. So he explains to Leto that if you are clever and if you are careful, I'm going to put this tooth in the back here. It's going to release this poison gas. You're definitely going to die either way. But if you do it right, the Baron will die too. He baits the Baron to come closer to him, and then he activates the tooth capsule, filling the room with a deadly poison. And what makes this so tragic is that Leto dies honestly believing that Jessica and Paul are dead. The Sardaukar, as we know, work under the Emperor. The Emperor sees Leto as a potential rival political opponent, and he teams up with the Harkonnens so that way they can be the fall guy. If the other great houses learn that the Emperor was involved in taking out this big house, they could easily rise up against him and all of the power would be thrown out of whack. So the Emperor has to take Leto out in a very sneaky way. In the book, the Sardaukar are actually disguised as Harkonnen men, but the implication in the movie is that the Sardaukar will kill everyone and there won't be any witnesses, so why the heck should they be in disguise? Lady Jessica and Paul are captured, and they are presumably going to be assaulted and then left in the desert to die. But because Lady Jessica is just a real cool lady, they get out of that. And thanks to some packs that Dr. Yue has left for them, they are able to survive a night in the desert. Throughout this entire time, though, Paul keeps having these visions. And as he gets exposed to more and more spice, these visions are getting more intense, and they're getting to be a lot. He keeps seeing this Fremen girl, and he keeps seeing that the Fremen are going to be fighting in his name, in his honor, and causing a jihad. They call it a crusade in this movie because, you know, I guess jihad sounds too Muslim and that might turn off some people, but in the book it's known as a jihad. Also among Paul's many prophecies and visions is this man, Jameis, a Fremen man who is showing him the ways of the desert. Although some people are sacrificed along the way, including Kynes and Duncan Idaho, Lady Jessica and Paul end up making their way to the Fremen. And initially they're almost turned away, but his story matches the one of their prophecy so much that they are inclined to take them in. But he's challenged. Jameis, the same man in Paul's visions who's been showing him how to do all of this, challenges Paul to a battle to the death. It's here that we get names to put with some of the people that were in Paul's visions. There's Chani, the girl, Jameis is the man, and Stilgar, who is the Fremen leader of sorts. Chani lets Paul borrow her crysknife, which is a very sacred and important weapon to the Fremen. It's made from the teeth of the sandworms, the tip is poisoned, and it's said that after you unsheath it, you are not allowed to resheath it until it has tasted blood. Paul ends up winning his fight against Jameis. This tells us something very important about Paul's visions. Paul can see multiple different versions of the future. His visions are not absolute and they are not definite. The future can change. And this is something interesting to think about as we move forward, as Paul tries to avoid having this intergalactic jihad carried out in the name of him. And it's not really seen in the movie, but I will say in the book, Paul cries because this is the first time he's ever killed someone. And crying over the dead to give moisture to the dead is a very big deal in Fremen culture because you're in the desert. You need to conserve as much water as possible. Also about the water in the desert. Somebody's water after they die, it goes to the tribe. In this case, because Jameis fought Paul, his water will go to Paul. Yeah. So they've gotten water extraction down really well. We end off with Paul and Jessica being accepted into the Fremen in an almost ominous kind of way, because Chani says that this is just the beginning. The beginning, as we see through Paul's different visions, is one of jihad. It's one of mass casualties. There were a couple of things that weren't in this movie, including that Lady Jessica was initially framed for being the insider. They knew that there had to be some sort of insider within the house, and it was initially framed to be Lady Jessica, which made Leto very suspicious of her and created all kinds of strife. Another thing was that Dr. Yue was a very close part of the family in the book. to the point where Lady Jessica considered him a really great friend. So that connection they didn't have enough time to build that, I guess, which is unfortunate because it makes the betrayal that much more impactful. If you want to get further into the minds of these characters, definitely consider listening or reading the book. If I had a sponsor, this would be a great place to put it, but I don't. So I listen to an audiobook from my local library. Check out your local library. It's free. A lot of libraries have canceled fees altogether because of the pandemic, and a lot of libraries have a robust collection of audiobooks. So there you go. Another thing that was kind of left out was the Bene Gesserit's deal is that they're trying to better the universe through eugenics. Great. I think they are made out to be evil witchy ladies, but that's not it at all. They are evil eugenics ladies. So Bene Gesserits are instructed to breed with certain people to get certain genetic results that can eventually bring about this Kwisatz Haderach, the chosen one, who can do things that'll, we'll get to that later. And although the detailed heritage of the Bene Gesserits exists, they're usually not allowed to know it because incest is easier to orchestrate if they don't know. Lady Jessica was instructed to have a girl with Duke Leto, but Duke Leto really wanted a son, so Lady Jessica had a boy instead, which kind of ruined a lot of plans for the Bene Gesserits, and they do not like it when that happens. And they also do a lot of really shady things for the Missionario Protectiva. Basically, they go into other cultures and plant prophecies, or they shape these cultures' religions on prophecies so that way they can better control them as they develop. Eugenics. Girl boss edition. Super messed up, but it's implied that they've done that with the Fremen and their belief in their chosen one. So that's good to know. The reason I think it's a shame that they don't emphasize further that Jessica had a son of her own choice and because of her love for Leto, I think it's a shame that they don't really capitalize on that because the big theme in both the movie and the series in general is Courage the Cowardly Dog. The things we do for love. Dune was a book that was written by Frank Herbert and published in 1965. It is also 489 pages long, not counting appendices. Counting appendices, that's an additional 42 pages. So it's a very long book. Dune is to science fiction what Lord of the Rings was to fantasy. You could kind of think of them like that. Dune is a very influential and important science fiction novel. I thought that this movie was a very, very good adaptation of it. There's a lot of information inside the book, and I think that they did a very good job at picking and choosing which to put in. Unfortunately, some of the details might be lost. Hyder is a lot creepier in the book. It's implied that he wants to do stuff with Lady Jessica just out of dominance and sadism. And there are a couple of things that are there, but you won't really understand the significance until the next movie. And that's why I'm choosing to be very careful with the things that I do explain. If you choose to read the book, I do want you to know that at the beginning of most of the chapters, there's a little subtitle written by the Princess Irulan, who is the Emperor's daughter. It kind of spoils the rest of the book, and that's something that I'm really glad that they didn't include in the movie. So be warned, if you plan on reading or listening to the book, that will come up. It is extremely likely that we're going to get a part 2. There's also going to be an HBO series about the sisterhood of the Bene Gesserits, so that's going to be interesting too. All in all, I think this adaptation was really great. It was visually well done. I think acting was great. Soundtrack was great. I look forward to seeing where Denis Villeneuve ends up going with the second movie and how much he chooses to cover versus not cover. I expect that my video on the second one will be doing a little bit of backtracking, but I didn't want to spoil the second movie for you. So what did you think of the new Dune movie? Have you seen any of the other adaptations, or would you be interested in a video about the other adaptations? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked it, give it a like. If you think I look pretty today, give it another like. If you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. This has been Flights of Fantasy, and until next time, my name is Kyrie. Live well and stay hydrated. So Dune is finally here. And you know what that means?